We're live. We
I
are
can hear
live.
everybody. Okay.
I think everyone's fine now. So we apologize for the problems. We had a lot of great comments that came into the last live feed. In fact, we were going to select one of those comments to start off the conversation. So if you can, again, let us know where you're watching from and put your questions in, and we will get the conversation going. I'm going to exit so the gentleman can speak. All right.
Okay.
Father Murr and Bob.
Great.
Father Murr, great to see
Robert,
you.
it's good to see you again. Tell me all about it.
Wednesday, February 7th. Bless me, Father, for I was entering the program and everything was reverberating in my microphone. So I would hear my own voice come back to me after 5 or 6 seconds.
Yeah.
And
Anyway, it's fixed now, and that's the
Yeah.
most important thing. Good.
Yeah, so I could not proceed, but now we have tried again, we've set out again, and this somehow is a metaphor for our lives.
Yes.
Also, I think it adds to our authenticity. People realize they really do have limited means. They're not super technology competent, but we're getting better, I think, as the months go by. We've got Lady Rotha again, greetings from the Isle of Man. And we had someone from Germany, Coco in Chile. Thank you very much for joining. Rosie Moyer, that's right, in Germany. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Marcia Esterling from Richmond, Virginia. Great to see you. Donna Eberly from Ontario, Canada. Father Murr, our predicament is profound. We're seeking salvation, and the road to perdition lies open in front of us. Financially, emotionally, the deceptions of the rich and powerful, the media canceling, there's wars, there's rumors of wars, and there's even inconstancy seemingly in the leadership of the church. But Jesus Christ, yesterday, today, and forever. Between these parameters, we're going to have our conversation.
Good. I'm game. Are you?
Yeah, very much so.
Excellent. Good.
I love speaking with you, and I also feel that you are an authentic testimony because of your contacts as a young man with very important people, VIPs. One was the great and holy Cardinal Edouard Gagnon, who was from Canada and who died in 2007. And you worked with him. You were still in your 20s. Well, this is me, and as a young man, and this is my father to the left. With Pope John Paul II, we went to his private mass, and he's giving us a rosary. Now, here's the woman you knew, in addition to Cardinal Gagnon. This is Mother Pasqualina. And Mother Pasqualina, you call in your book, this is your book by Charles Theodore Murr, that's you. And it's a fascinating account of a friendship between a woman of a certain age who is now almost forgotten. If Pope Pius XII died in 1958 and you came to know her in the 70s, so 68, 78, 20 years after, she was probably the person closest to Pope Pius XII. You came to know her, you spoke with her.
Undoubtedly. Not probably, undoubtedly she was. Yes.
And Pius XII is at the crossroads of the most complicated, tragic, horrific events of our last century, the Second World War, the Holocaust, the division of Europe into two parts, East and West, the Iron Curtain, and the attempt of the communists to take over Europe and the attempt of the Americans to protect Europe from communism. And you were in the 70s talking with her every week or two or three, and you would drive your car up to her residence. And I really thought people would begin with this man, Father Charles Murr, a young priest, with the woman who's the closest person to the central pope of the 20th century. And I thought people would be fascinated by that. And that can get us on to the larger questions of what we face in 2024 as war again is occurring in Ukraine, as there is a tremendous struggle occurring in Israel, as the lines are being drawn that look very dangerous for World War III, as Pope Francis has warned us that World War III has already begun in pieces. But I want to start with this lady, this woman, this nun, this holy person who became an intimate friend of yours?
You want to start? How do I start? Just tell you how it started?
Yes. Yes.
You start at the beginning, right?
Yeah, start at the beginning.
All right. No, I had a great devotion to Pius XII. In the book, The Godmother, I wrote, it's the first chapter. I wrote where that devotion to him came from. And it was fostered by another pious nun who just died last year, as a matter of fact, 2 years ago. Sister Wilberta, who I speak about a lot, she taught me first and second grade. She's a great Dominican sister. In the days when our schools were run by Catholic schools were run by nuns.
And where was that, Father Murr?
I was in St. Paul, Minnesota. Actually, in South St. Paul, Minnesota, I went to school at St. Augustine's Parish. St. Augustine Parish, which is rather famous today because they have the traditional Latin Mass, and they have a fantastic pastor. Oh my goodness! Now I'm going to be ashamed of myself for not remembering his name. I met him a couple times, and he's
well, maybe we can look it up. While you talk, I'll try to look it up. The pastor of St. Augustine in
South St. Paul.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, St. Augustine's school was a fantastic school. It was magnificent. It was in the heyday of Catholic of the Catholic presence in the United States of America. Catholics were really coming into their own, and we had a Catholic education that was superior to anything that was available. I was in a classroom at St. Augustine, I think, with 54 students. We changed to St. John Vianney right up the road a bit, and I think we were 52 or so with one nun. Imagine that. But anyway, they taught us fantastically. I don't know how they did it, but they did. And Sister Wilberta in first and second grade. It was in second grade that Pope Pius XII died, and we were praying for his health. Okay,
is it Father Eckert? Father Eckert?
Eckert, exactly. A great priest. His sermons, his homilies are outstanding. I listen to them every once in a while on YouTube. Just really, really great. A great pastor, and as sort of rebuilt, given that whole parish another spirit. Great job. Anyway, the school is closed. Every school I attended is closed now.
Okay. So
they're all finished.
So that's that's a data point that everyone has.
Sure it is. I mean, this is what happened. This is what happened, and this is why I'm not particularly happy with where the church is today, because I saw how it got here, and it got here the wrong way. We lost an awful lot of people along the way, and as I said, I think it was the last time we were talking in grade school, but especially in high school. I was taught by the Christian Brothers the Christian Brothers and the Sisters of St. Joseph. It was a co-institutional, they called it at that time, school. The problem was that what we were having, we didn't realize it, the students, the religious, both the Christian Brothers and the Sisters of St. Joseph, were going through their own crisis of vocations, and they took us along for the ride. So I mean, to put it quite simply, we lost a lot of people. A lot of people lost their faith during those years, and it was due to bad example. I don't know how else to say it. Anyway, in second grade, we were praying for the health of the Pope Pius XII.
1958.
1958, and so I was of the mindset at 8 years of age that if you prayed for someone hard enough, God would listen and save that person, whatever it was, if it was sickness or death, or close to death experience, whatever it was, you could ask God in prayer and he would answer. Because I did have already in childhood prayers that were answered. Right? So that was it. Anyway, when he died, It's very funny, Robert, because when he died, I'm not laughing at the fact that he died, but when he died, we were in school, and the announcement came around to all of the classrooms that we were to go into St. Augustine Church to pray some prayers for the dead, for the deceased pontiff, Pius XII.
Mm-hmm.
I refused to go in. I refused to go into because I was angry. 8 years old, and I'm angry because I had prayed so hard for the Pope's health that it was the first time I got angry with God at 8 years of age, because he didn't follow through with what I wanted.
Well,
this great nun, Sister Wilberta, this great nun, she sent the rest of the class in. The entire school was in the church. And she stayed behind with me. She didn't get upset with me or anything else. She just asked me what was going on. And I explained to her. And I wasn't going to go into church because I'd had it. And she took time. She sat down with me. We just had a couple minutes because all of us had to be in church. She took time to explain to me what the will of God was, and that my prayers were heard, because all prayers are always heard, but God had something else in mind, right? And that kind of thing. And then she was very, very kind. And that act of kindness, Robert, I think that really sparked in me the beginning of a priestly vocation. I mean that. I was 8 years old. And it was that kindness and explaining to me the will of God as best she could. We became friends all through life.
Wow.
And she just died. She only died 2 years ago. And
So,
and I asked her, the last time I spoke to her, I was with another friend who also wanted to say hello to her. And I said, "Do you remember that encounter?" She said, "Do I remember it?" She said, "I remember it quite well, because it was the first time somebody had asked me a serious question about death." She said, she was only 22 years old at the time.
oh
right?
my God, Father.
Right? I mean, the sisters who taught us, Robert, was an incredible thing. Most of them did not have a bachelor's degree.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that they were going to summer school constantly, right, to get their bachelor's degree and then their master's degree. They were always in summer school.
Well,
But they were, I don't know, they were just remarkable, splendid teachers. Anyway, the kindness of this Sister Wilberta, toward me left a mark on me. She really did something. Yes, a mustard seed.
Thank you.
Yes, as Miss Murphy says properly, it's absolutely correct. And anyway, that was that. Years later, when I got to Rome, I was as a lay student. I got to Rome. One of the first things that I wanted to do, and it was the first thing I wanted to do, I was 18 years old. Or excuse me, I was not 18. I was 16 years old.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought you were
17 years old. 17 years old, because that's when Humane Vitae came out. I was there when Humane Vitae came out, right?
Yeah.
I went immediately from the hotel. I was staying at the Columbus Hotel, right down the street from the Vatican.
I know it well.
I ran. I was 17 years old. It was morning. I ran up to the Basilica, and in those days there was no security, nothing. I went in. I knew exactly where to go to get to the tomb of Pius XII.
Wow.
Right? I already kind of figured out what the lay of the land, and I knew the Basilica from studies. I went down to the tomb of Pius XII and said my first prayer there, and then found right across the way, just a matter of feet away from the tomb of St. Peter the Apostle.
Yes.
Pius XII asked to be buried as close to St. Peter as possible. Anyway, my devotion to this man was great, and I always took Pius XII as a patron saint, as my personal patron saint.
Well, he hasn't been canonized.
Oh, I don't care. Listen, we could get into that. I could tell you about some who have been canonized that I don't understand.
All right,
and this man, whether he's canonized or not, is certainly in heaven. There's not a question in my mind of that.
Well, there's a lot of opposition to him and criticism.
Oh, sure, there's a lot of opposition, and that's good. There
And
should
that
be opposition.
and
There
that
should be
brings
opposition because the church always has had enemies, and she will always have enemies. And the opposition that people oppose you, this is to me is a sign that you're doing right. If the
could
world hates you, remember it hated me first, Christ said. Right? Isn't that
yeah.
aren't those his words?
Yeah.
Anyway, in 1974, I was in Rome. I got there as a student now of philosophy. After I finished college, I went to study philosophy. And as a student of philosophy, I found out that Mother Pasqualina was still alive.
So you just heard that she was living.
Well, I assumed that she was dead. I just
Right.
assumed, I don't know. I just assumed, when you're 20, what was I, 24 years old at that time? Yeah, in 1974. When you're 24 years old, I don't know. You think everything that happened before seems like the Old Testament. It seems so
Yes.
long ago. It seems like ancient history.
Okay.
So in 1975, I was accepted as a seminarian for a diocese in Mexico, and I was studying at the Pontifical Mexican College and going to the the Gregorian University for theology.
And that happened because as a person.
Oh, that's a whole story of which I'm writing a book now. It's going to be good.
But the main point is that somehow you hadn't been sent by your bishop there. You came to Rome.
No bishop.
And then you met Mexicans there who were so impressive and friendly. And
anyway, it's a long story, and it's going to be in another book. And the name of the book is "And It Was Night." I have the title. I have the title. I'm just missing the book, right? But I'm writing it right now.
Well, that's from the.
However, I went to go see Mother Pasqualina when I found out Monsignor Mario Marini, told me that she was still alive. I said, "That's incredible." He found her address. In those days, there was no Google. If you would say to Google something, people would look at you as if you had 10 heads, I'm sure, in those days. But he found her address and gave it to me. And I called, made an appointment, and then I went to go see her. The first thing that happened, her dog attacked me.
So was she in a convent? Did she have other sisters living with her?
On Monte Mario, you know Rome.
I do know Monte Mario.
You know Monte Mario, the observatory on Monte Mario?
Mm-hmm.
When Pius XII died, she was almost expelled from the Vatican immediatho
I remember.
They wanted her out. Because why? Because she knew where all the skeletons were buried.
Yeah.
She knew who was who and what was what. And she also controlled during the 19, almost 20 years of Pope Pius's pontificate, she was the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
You went through her to have an audience with the Pope, and she knew who was a friend of his and who was not. She knew who were the politicians, all this. So she made a lot of enemies, but she didn't care because what she was living for was the Pope.
Okay.
And for the good of the church. I went there. I found the house. When he died, they expelled her from the Vatican. Cardinal Spellman of New York. They speak so horribly about him today. I don't know where in the world they're getting all of that garbage, but it doesn't add up to anything I know about him. Cardinal Spellman, with private funds that he got, moved her to the North American College for a few years. She was working in the kitchen of the North American College, right?
Are you kidding me?
While Cardinal Spellman also talked to other people and got funding for her, both in the United States and in Germany, to build a house she built for retirees, an old folks home for women on Monte Mario. It's a beautiful facility. She built it and then moved in there with her sisters. And she was a presence in Rome. After I met her, then I started seeing her often. I didn't realize that I had been running into her all of this time. I just didn't know who she was. But when I first came to see her, Robert, I went up. You get to the gate, not to the gate, but there's a wall with a door, right? and you're buzzed in. Well, between the wall and the convent part of the house is a space, if I'm remembering correctly, maybe of about 30 feet or so, maybe more.
Yeah.
Walking from there to the house, they had a German shepherd that came out of nowhere. And I've got a cassock on it this time. And it thank God I had a cassock on, because it grabbed the cassock and not my leg.
Oh, man.
It bit into it and tore it to shreds. Anyway, when she finally saw what had happened, she herself asked me to take off the cassock. She would and leave it with her, and she would mend it. So she mended it. So that's how we got to know each other.
Well, can you permit me to just say I'm astonished and edified by every aspect of your story. Your priesthood, you say, was related to Pius XII. You say it was related to praying to him or for him, and that he died anyway, so you wouldn't go into the prayers for his repose of his soul. And your very young nun teacher talked to you that she in old age still remembered that conversation.
Sure. Yeah, she remembered.
Well, these are astonishing elements that are scattered through what you've told us. And then you arrive in Rome, first on apparently a summer trip in the late 60s. 68
right.
was
I went to study French in Switzerland. And we went to Rome as my cousin and I went to Rome as a private excursion.
Yeah.
And that's how I fell in love with Rome, and I knew I was going to go back. And when I finished college, I went back to do philosophy, thinking of becoming a lawyer.
I see.
And then I met Monsignor Marini, who
God had wonderful plans.
Convinced me that I had a priestly vocation. So it's a very strange life. But I'll tell you something. I wouldn't change it with anybody. Anyway, that's.
But I'm just going to react even further. Oh, we're going to have a question here now. I see, but we will come to this. Everybody watching, Father Murr and Dr. Moynihan, did either of you personally know Malachi Martin, Father Malachi Martin? If so, what do you think of his writings and interviews? Thank you, from Albany, New York. We've come to that, but I just wanted to emphasize. It's an important question, of course. But you then show up in the summer of 68, of course, the transitional year for the revolution in the West and in the church. Vatican II has finished. And you immediately leave the Columbus Hotel, go into the Basilica. Well, not immediately, but you scout things out and you go and you pray at the tomb of Pius XII. And then later, you're in Rome 5-6 years later, studying. You finally decided to consider and start studying for the priesthood. You have a cassock on. You go to see, you get the address.
I've got this sun coming. There we go. Okay, go ahead.
All right. And then the German shepherd comes and tears the cassock.
Oh, and by the way, mother says to me, she said, Don Carlo, il cane normalmente è molto gentile. I said, what is the dog's name? And she says, the dog's name is Wolf. I said, what a marvelous name for a genteel dog, Wolf. Anyway, so we became fast friends, just because of that. And I went to see her. Robert, I've got it's a crazy thing. I don't know why it is, but in my life, I have always had an older woman. An older woman, 70 or 80 or even 90 years old, someone always in my life. And that woman to me was a very special font of wisdom. Mm-hmm. I had uncles, grandparents. Our family was alive with all sorts of advice and this, that, and the other thing. But these women, the first one was my great aunt. Imagine that, my great grandfather's aunt. She was a sister of St. Joseph of Carondelet, and she was magnificent. She died at 98 years of age. Brilliant, sharp, until she died, till the day she died.
And her name?
Her name was Sister Cecile Letourneau, and she in St. Paul, Minnesota. brilliant, brilliant lady, and pious, and a saint. And you know what I remember most about her? How she listened. Her capacity to listen. And you knew that she was with you every word, every way, every word of the way. But from that, then I had Mother Pasqualina in my life, and she was just a great woman, and she knew things that I wouldn't even imagine. Not just facts about history and this. She knew spiritual points that were very, very important to me. And we would talk about things spiritual. It was fantastic. And you knew that they were coming from an authentic source, a woman who was very saintly in her own life, and a woman who had suffered a lot, because what she underwent in the Vatican, the 20 years she was with him as Pope, but she was also with him when he was nuncio in Germany and in Bavaria, right? Bavaria first and then in Germany. So she had great insight. And anyway, I went to go visit her on a regular basis. I would say at least once every 2 weeks, and always with she had something to say, would tell me a story. We would be together for maybe 45 minutes to an hour, just like our program is right now. And I would ask her this question and that question. They were fascinating answers. And so years later, I decided to write those short stories of things that she told me, because I knew that those stories would die with her.
Yeah.
They the story, for example, she told me that when Pope Pius XII had sent her to exhume the body of Pope Pius IX, preparing for his beatification, and they couldn't find the body. They couldn't find his body where he was supposed to be buried, right? And she told me the whole story. She got there with the workers from the Vatican, and it was to change the clothes on the body and everything else. She said they got to San Lorenzo, Fuori le Mura, where he's buried.
Right.
And when they got there, they opened up his tomb, and there was no body in the casket. What there was in the casket were rocks.
Incredible.
Right? So they all stood back. She's got like 4 workers there, grave diggers, and she's standing there and she's directing this. And it came to her, she said, dig deeper, take the coffin out and dig deeper. Well, they did. And that's where they found the body. They had evidently buried Pius XII before his funeral mass, because they expected the Freemasons in Rome to throw his body into the Tiber River on procession. And he insisted on being buried outside the Vatican.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Right? So they had already buried him the night before.
Okay.
And there was a struggle with the coffin, but they had filled the coffin with rocks so that it would have the weight of a human body. And there was a struggle on the bridge, on the Ponte Sant'Angelo, to try to throw it in. And if it weren't for Catholic action, the young Catholic students, university students, the Freemasons would have thrown the entire thing into the Tiber River. Anyway, she found his body. She said, don't let anybody ever tell you that when a person dies, and I've heard this from everybody, from scientists and from doctors. She said, don't let anyone tell you that when a person dies, his hair or her hair stops growing. It does not. She said, I had to shave Pius IX. He had died like 70 years before.
Incredible.
She said, I had to shave him and cut his fingernails that had grown.
Yeah.
Right? She said, and his fingers were absolutely flexible. It was as if he was asleep. She said the only thing that he lacked, she said in pictures and in photographs and in paintings, he always had rosy cheeks. She said that was lacking. Everything else was just the way it was. And she changed his clothes and everything else and put on Pius XII had sent one of his own cassocks for him to be changed into. Anyway, those kind of things. And then she would tell me about the Freemasons and their anti-Catholic activities and things. She was a font of wisdom. So I thought, before I died, it's like murder in the 33rd degree. Before I die, I want to write some of these things down that they not be lost. That's the whole idea.
Yes.
Anyway, the book, The Godmother, is full of stories like that, and they're fascinating stories.
Right.
What they went through during the war, with all of the Jews that they sheltered, in throughout all of Rome. Pius XII saved all of their lives, and she said, and you might think it's easy to shelter all of these Jews. We put them in every place we could, but especially in the major basilicas and in Castel Gandolfo, where we had diplomatic immunity. She said, it's one thing to shelter them, but now you have to feed them 3 times a day. She said, believe me, we had no food in Rome. People were eating cats.
Yeah.
She said the Holy Father didn't eat meals. He ate just a piece of bread himself during the war. It was horrible. So the Pope finally contacted General Franco from Spain. And it was Franco who sent over shipments of grain and wheat so that bread could be made to keep all of the Jews alive. Right? Mm. All of those stories. It was fascinating what she lived and what she shared with me. And a very deeply spiritual woman. Anyway, I could go on for hours, and we want to get on to other things. But
we will get on, and we will right now. But I wanted to summarize for the audience. You went back to the case of her discovering the body, evidently incorrupt, of
absolutely incorrupt, she said.
Pope Pius IX, who was one of the longest reigning popes, and he died in 1878. And as you correctly said, I was just reading the other day again about his death, because it occurred. He presided over the First Vatican Council in 1870, and he was the Pope who had to face the terrible attacks of the ending of the political territorial authority of the Vatican, which was the Papal States. They were taken away in 1870. He lived 8 more years. The Freemasons, anti-clerical, had united Italy in 1870. That's the beginning of Italy. The Papal States were gone, so Italy, North and South, came together. And it was not clear what the Vatican would become, and it didn't become anything until 1929. That's just to give a certain historical context. And so the 1878.
For our viewers, and you know this also, this was a time where the Pope was referred to himself as a prisoner of the Vatican.
Yes. Yeah, they never left. The popes from 1870 to 1929 once they became Pope, never took a step outside of Vatican City. Which was so. In 78, he was being taken over to San Lorenzo to be buried, and there were crowds that gathered to overthrow the people who were carrying the casket and throw his body into the Tiber River. This is how terrible the relations were. Yeah. And and your description of the big thing being filled with rocks and him having been buried already earlier hours before, so that in fact, if they had actually gotten the casket, he wouldn't have been in it.
That's right.
That's confirmed by a first-hand eyewitness, Mother Pasqualina, and we heard it on this program. You've confirmed an important fact of history. Okay. So
and also, Robert, just for those who think that the Freemasons, when we talk about the Freemasons, a lot of people confuse them with the Shriners, men coming and driving little cars around wearing fezzes. This is not what we're dealing with in Europe. These are anti-clerical, anti-Catholic men, mostly, in high places, who would do anything to destroy the functioning of the Catholic Church. Right?
Yeah, we will go into that in the future. Malachi Martin also talks about that, and we're going to move to him in just a moment. But I don't want people to be left confused. Pius XII, from a noble Roman family, goes to Germany as the nuncio. Already in the early 19, I think he was there in 1919, or certainly there through the 20s. So he at some point encounters Mother Pasqualina, and she in some way commits herself to him.
Well, she
And,
was sent. She was sent to be his housekeeper
right.
for
And then,
the nunciature.
but a
Yeah,
housekeeper is a housekeeper. She was a woman of intelligence, a woman of hard work, a
absolutely.
strong woman. He gets a housekeeper who becomes a confidant, who
That's
becomes a
right.
support. And so that's all through the 20s and all through the 30s. That's the time after the First World War. It's the rise, the terrible problems in Germany, then the rise of the Nazis, and into the 30s, the Great Depression comes along, and then Hitler arrives in power January 30th, 1933. And Pius is still, no, Pius has been called back to the Vatican to be Secretary of State, or Senego, or Senigo, or is the new nuncio. And they create a concordat. And this is the Vatican is accused of coming to a kind of an agreement with Germany in 1933. And people weren't sure from 33 on exactly how this would all turn out, how serious this National Socialist Germany was about eradicating or changing the race of people living in Germany. And they go into the late 30s, and Pius XI also starts to hesitate. He's preparing documents. I just read about a secret encyclical that was about to be released just as he was dying.
Yes.
And he died actually on February 10th, 1939. And on the 8th and 9th, he was sick. He started to feel better on the 9th, but some people were opposed to a document where he was going to be very strong, attacking the racism of the German National Socialists, the Nazis. And then he died the next morning about 5 in the morning. Cardinal Tisserand shows up at 6:19 in the morning of February 10th, 1939. And he thinks Pius XI is still alive, and later the next day is going to release the encyclical. And the text of the encyclical was found in Cardinal Tisserand's papers in Switzerland. I just was reading about this. We can come back to this later. But right after that, Pius XII is elected. The war hasn't really started yet, but it will now crash into war, September 1st, 39. And Pius XII faces taking care of the Jews and dealing with this rabid anti-Semitism of the Nazis. So he brings 9 or 10,000 Jews living in Rome, 8 or more thousand were protected by the Vatican. That's why I wanted to go through this to make.
Yeah, there was when the Nazis came in and took over Rome.
1943.
It was incredible. They took over Rome, and they said immediately they wanted 100 kilos of pure gold.
Yeah, that's
or
right.
the Jews would all be killed. That simple. They immediately sent, I believe, 3,000 Jews to concentration camps in Austria and Germany immediately.
Yeah, I don't think they got 3,000. I think they only sent about 900 or 1,000, but we could go back.
Is that right? Okay. Well, there was a first train that went out of those Jews, so they were speaking seriously. They weren't kidding around.
No question.
They wanted this made. And Pius XII issued statements. He got it out, and through Mother Pasqualina to all of the parishes, all of anything, to melt down gold, to bring in gold, any gold that they had, which they did. They came up with 100 kilos of pure gold and gave it to the Nazis to pay for peace for the Jews. That still wasn't enough.
Yeah.
They put all of the Jews in homes and places and took care of them until the Nazi threat was finished. I'll just say this, and you know this, Robert. The Jews at the end of World War II reconditioned Castel Gandolfo. There's a plaque in Castel Gandolfo in thanksgiving to Pope Pius XII for all he did to save their people through Rome. The Jewish rabbi, the head rabbi of the Jewish synagogue, which is right across the river from the Vatican,
Yes.
Beautiful building. The Jewish rabbi, his last name was Zoli,
Yes.
right? And his wife and his children, his entire family.
Well, Father, I met his
became
daughter and
Catholic.
his granddaughter. I met them and they talked about him.
Yeah,
Yes.
Catholics. Catholics, and he took, this is the chief rabbi of Rome, for a baptismal name. What was the baptismal name he took?
Eugenio.
Eugene, which was Pope Pius's baptismal name.
Eugenio
In
Patelli,
thanksgiving
yes.
to the Pope for all he had done.
Yeah.
I mean, this was amazing. And Pope Pius was declared a hero to the Jews. He saved over, it is estimated, these are by Jewish standards, by Israeli standards, over I think it's, I may be mistaken, but I think it's 250,000 lives directly to him. He gave the order for the first time in the history of the church, baptismal certificates should be falsified for the Jews so that they would look like Catholics and would be able to escape death. It was heroic efforts were made. People all over the world, all over Europe took care of them. And also there was something else too. Early on, Pope Pius condemned what was happening to the Jews in Holland.
Yes.
Because that's sort of where it began. Well, as a response to his condemnation of the treatment of the Jews, the next day, twice as many Jews were rounded up and taken to concentration camps. The Dutch bishops met and they pleaded with him, please don't say anything more. We're dealing with the problem as best we can, but if you condemn the Nazis, they will exterminate all of them by the day after tomorrow. It'll be done.
Yeah.
Just as a reaction. So you're there. People say he should have condemned more strongly. He was being asked to please be quiet. And these were the bishops who were listening when taking care of these Jewish people.
Yeah.
The Jews themselves are saying, please don't let him cause us more harm by condemning. Well, anyway, so it's a complicated matter, but I can tell you this: Pope Pius XII did everything possible that could be done, and in that horrible situation of World War II, to save everyone that he could. Look, there's something else too that Mother Pasqualina said to me that I thought was right on. She said, approximately 5,000 Catholic priests were rounded up and put into concentration camps and killed during World War II. She said to me, Don Carlo, do you think that if the Holy Father couldn't protect his own priests and get them out of concentration camps, he's responsible for what happened to the Jews too? This is incredible. And she said the same thing. Look at New York City. Right? She gave me this example. I said, yes. She said, what's the population of New York City? I said, at that time, I thought it was something like 15 million people. 15 million people. Do you think that there are 5,000 priests in New York City? I said, no. She said, of course they're not. Do you know what 5,000 priests represents to a population? Anytime a priest spoke against Hitler or against the Nazis, they were taken and killed. None of that is ever brought up. None of that is ever brought up. It's I don't know why, but we're all quiet on that front. Mother Pasqualina knew all about this. Also after the war, Pius XII asked her, and she took it on as a personal responsibility, convents of nuns all throughout Europe.
Yes.
Were ransacked. It's terrible to say that the nuns were raped, they were beaten by Nazi soldiers. You know, there's something to remember in all of this. There wasn't one instant of anything like that happening from American, English, Australian, or Canadian soldiers. That never happened when they came in the war theater. There wasn't that behavior. It was a behavior on the part of the Nazis. So now you've got all of these terribly damaged women to put back together, right? This is horrible. Some of them suffered atrocities. Many of them were killed. We know that. But just horrible, horrible, horrible things that were done to them. Mother Pasqualina and a group of priests, of psychologists, psychiatrists, anybody that they could get to help put back and heal all of what these women particularly had suffered. So it's not so black and white. There was an awful lot of suffering by pious Catholics also during that whole thing.
Yes,
right?
No question. What I really intentionally am trying to do this is just taking longer than I expected. But I wanted to set up for the audience the concept of a terrific series of challenges, Pius XII being a central one. All during the 50s, he was praised, even by Golda Meir, president of Israel.
Absolutely.
And yet in about 1961, a play came out in Germany called The Vicar, Stellvertreter. And that was, they said, they called him Hitler's deputy, or the vicar of Hitler. And they said that Pius XII served Hitler, made the Concordat with him, did not help the Jews. And that created the Black Legend against Pius.
And that, Robert, by the way, that was translated into English as The Deputy.
Yeah, The Deputy.
The play was The Deputy, right?
And the guy, I think the guy was a leftist, was paid by the Communist Party to write that.
He was paid by the Marxist communists, yes.
Yeah, so every time you look at information, you look for who paid for it, what is its point.
Follow the money.
And we're trying to do that in this program, and I think it's going to take a little bit longer than I expected, but it's going to lead us from the 50s. So she knew Pius from about 1920, let's call it, to 1958. He died. So the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, almost 40 years. So she's now an old lady through the 60s, and she's meeting you in the 70s and transmitting to you as her safe deposit box the stories of her life. And that's why people should read your book and listen to what you have to say, because you haven't hardly touched on it even now. And then we find the church itself continuing to pass through a number of gyrations. We're coming eventually up to 2024, where we are today, and the problems the church faces. But one figure between Mother Pasqualina and us is Malachi Martin. And you knew him. We're going to not have time to talk about him, but let's introduce him and say why he's important. And how well did you know him?
I'll tell you what, Robert. I'll tell you what. I unfortunately have to end this in about 4 minutes, because I have another appointment that I cannot. If I could, I would get out of it, but I can't get out of it.
You're a popular man.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Tutti mi vogliono, tutti mi chiedono, delle fanciulle e delle ragazze, Figaro qua, Figaro là. Remember Figaro? Anyway,
everyone wants me, from the children to.
That's it. But anyway, we should get on the subject of Malachi Martin for the next time.
But you did know him.
It's an interesting character, and yes, I knew him rather well. As a matter of fact, the book that I'm writing right now is kind of an interesting little vignette story. And It Was Night. I'm rewriting my first book. The first book that I wrote, I found, and also readers found, to be a little bit too shocking. It was rough. It was rough, but I was describing rough and shocking circumstances, right?
Yeah.
But it was a little bit too much for many of my readers. So I decided to tone it down and rewrite it. All right. And some of the language was very harsh too, because you're dealing with, that book dealt a lot with Mexican drug lords, with kidnappings and torture. Right. And when people are being kidnapped and tortured and everything else, they're not speaking the king's English, you know.
Well, let's hope we don't have those drug lords in the United States before too long.
They walk among us. They walk among us. They're there. Believe me, they're horrible. Anyway, so I wanted to tone everything down a little bit, because it was too rough for a lot of readers, and rightfully so. I understand that. So I'm rewriting it. But when I started to write it to begin with, I was in Salzburg, and I contacted Malachi Martin in New York City, and I couldn't believe it. He said, "Well, what are you doing this evening?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Well, why don't we have dinner?" I said, "Absolutely." I mean, I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe it.
Wait,
So
I thought you said you were in Salzburg. You were in New York.
Wait a minute. I'm in New York talking to him. I wrote the book in Salzburg.
I understand.
Right? But before going to Salzburg, I talked to him. I was already in New York, working in a parish at St. Joseph's in the Bronx. So I went down to Manhattan, had dinner with him in a restaurant called Capri. I believe it's on 68 in Lexington. And we talked about this, and I said, I have this book that I'm trying to write. It's very, very difficult because it's very personal. And he said, "Well, tell me about it." And I said, "Why would you want to listen to my story? I want to listen to what you have to say." Right? I'm sitting with Malachi Martin. It's just the two of us. Tell me about you. Tell me about your writings. There was a lot of controversy at the time. He said, No. Tell me your story. I told him the story. He got done and he said to me, "Listen, that is such a great story that if you don't write it, I will." Right? Wow. I mean, that blew me away. So from there, I went to Salzburg and I dedicated a lot of the time during every day to writing this book. And he wrote me, continued. He was fantastic. He wrote me and he called to see how I was doing. And one of the things that he wrote me, and I still have it enshrined somewhere. It's among my things. This book is going to be fantastic. It's going to be a mini series on television or a movie. He said, "And if you don't write it, I will," with an exclamation mark. Again, that's great. Anyway, when I came back to New York, I got to know him more and thanked him very much for the encouragement. He encouraged me a lot. He encouraged me a lot to start writing. As a matter of fact, I think without him, I really wouldn't have started writing. So anyway, it was good. And then the next time we can talk a little bit about him and about his books. And
well, I just have one question. We leave. You had a personal testimony in Cardinal Gagnon, who did a tremendous research. Then you had Mother Pasqualina. Is Malachi Martin, in your view, a person who is a witness to things that are important for us to know?
I'm going to answer as honestly as I can, Robert, and the answer is yes and no.
Okay.
All right. I'm not playing around. Yes and no. And the next time we meet, we'll get into that yes and no. I promise. Okay.
Next week.
Yes, we will have the program next week, and we have
Great.
2 more positions open on our pilgrimage to you in 1 month from now in Spain when we come for a Lenten retreat. Father I was gonna say Martin.
You remember me. Don't worry about it, Robert. I've been called worse. Believe me, I've been called worse. God bless. We'll talk to you next week. I've got to go now.
Bye, Don Carlo. Bye, Don Carlo.
Ciao to everyone.